is Stronger Than My Father with Marcus Meneese.
Welcome to another episode of Stronger Than My Father podcast. I am your host, Marcus Meneese. Thanking you guys so much for listening in and your support of this podcast. This podcast is produced by my favorite producer, Mr. Jim McCarthy. And we also like to thank Miss A. Renee Jones for her assistance and also Latoya Meneese for their production assistance. This couldn't be done without a team of people helping this podcast grow and to develop to be something hopefully people can enjoy and also help them with their everyday lives. This is our third series in our Mother's Day edition. I want to do a podcast to honor moms. And I have the favorite mom for this episode in my own mother, Mother Connie Meneese, who has been the solid rock in my life, the disciplinary who helped me, shape me to be where I'm at today. And I always tell people to honor your mothers while they're on earth, because you never know when they're going to go home. So welcome, Mom. Welcome to your son's podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so happy for you to be here and talk a little mom wisdom. So I want people to know a little bit about you, and then we want to go into some mother wisdom. So when moms listen to this podcast, I want you to give them wisdom and encouragement on raising kids and the spiritual side and the natural side. Importance of that fatherhood piece from your experience, and also importance of raising a daughter and a son, why it's so important for their relationship to be solid. So for my audience who don't know, this is my mother. So tell a little bit about your history growing up in Memphis with your mom and your relationship with your dad.
My history with my mother was very close. My father and my mother divorced when I was about 3 months old, so I don't really have a history with my father. I would say, though, that not having a father in the home had an emotional effect on me, because when I started to school, all of the other kids in my inner circle always had their father, and they always talked about the things their father did with them. And I didn't have that. So I resented the fact that my father was never around. And yes, that affected me. But I thank God that I did have a mother who was both a mother and a father, who guided me. And I thank God, even though she's gone, for her prayers that guided me and helped me to be the mother that I am.
I remember when we was in Sunday school a couple of weeks ago, you had a story about when you was 12 and you was working in the cotton field and you told God to bless me with a husband to raise my kids. Why did you pray? Why was that prayer at 12 years old important to you?
At 12 years old, I realized that I did not want my children to grow up with feeling the same emotional effects that I felt without a father in the home. So I asked God then to give me someone who would not be like my father, not even having a really strong relationship with God. I knew enough at 12 years old to know that I did not want my children to grow up without a father in the home that loved them and who would work and help them. So I knew that, and God heard my prayer.
Well, I think one thing that I'm so admonished about you, Mom, is you told me as your father was dying, you wrote him a letter. And why was it so important for you to write your father a letter as he was in his older age, as he was, passing away? Why was it important for you to write your dad a letter, and why did you write him a letter?
It was so back then when I wrote my father a letter. That's when I had left home to go to school, and I had not even had any psychology courses at the time. I had not had any psychology courses. So I didn't even know a lot about forgiveness and how to get things out of you. I didn't know any of that. But when I heard that my father was on his deathbed in the hospital, I sat down and I wrote him a letter. And I explained to him that he wasn't a good father. But I told him that I don't blame you because I don't know how you were raised. And I told him about all of the hurt that I felt as a child with him not being around. I put all of that in writing, and I explained to him that maybe it wasn't your fault. So I forgive you. I released all of the hurt that had been built up in me. I was 18 at the time. So I released all of the hurt that and the hatred that I had for him. I put it all in that letter. And I didn't know at the time that that psychologists teach people on how to put things in writing to release it. I didn't know any of that until I took psychology in college, and I thought, I did that back when I was 18. I released it all. And when I released it all in that particular letter, it left me. And it left me with the fact that maybe he didn't know how to be a father. Maybe he wasn't taught, so I cannot blame him. And I put it all out, and God took it all away.
Well, that's deep, and I know a lot of people don't do that, and they hold their resentment for a long time. And you've taught numerous of Sunday school classes on not having resentment and anger and holding bitterness, because bitterness can destroy you. Bitterness can take you to so many different places that you've taught us. So when you told me that when you wrote your dad that letter, how did your dad receive that? Did you get any announcement on how you received that letter? Did he call you, or he just read the letter and then just moved on with life?
Well, my sister, I got the report because I was away from home in school. I got the report that when my sister went to the hospital, she read the letter to him. And because she felt the same things that I felt growing up, as she read the letter to my father, she said she was crying. And she said that my father had asked her to stop. Just stop. It's kind of like he didn't want to hear any of that at all. And so when I got the word that I needed to come to the hospital because he only had a few days to live, at the time, my mom didn't have money to send me to catch the bus to come home. But my sisters and brothers sent me money, so I was able to catch the bus and come home. And when I walked into the hospital room and he saw that it was me, he turned his head. It's like he didn't want to deal with me. But you know what? Because I had released everything in that letter, I felt only sorry for him when, if I had not put the things in that letter to him, I would have gotten mad. I would have probably spoke him out, but I didn't. I felt sorry for him. And I thank God that I had gotten everything out of me so that I did not have any hatred for him.
Well, I mean, I didn't know that part of the story. I don't remember you wrote the letter. I didn't know he turned his head.
He turned his head.
Did he say anything to you?
No, he never said a word to me.
How did that make you feel when you went in and he just didn't say nothing?
Well, I felt bad. I felt like he owed me an apology because I apologized to him for hating him, and I released everything. I felt like on his deathbed he should have at least said, "I'm sorry," but he did not.
And so, but you didn't allow that to carry you moving forward. You was able to release that and also to move forward. So now you're in college, and I want to hear the story of you meeting my dad, who is, you guys been married almost 51 years. So I'm so happy y'all hit 50, and I'm looking forward to your celebration on next month. And so,
so am I.
So what did you see in my dad you think what made him a great candidate to be a husband?
Well, to be honest with you, I really didn't date.
Mm-hmm.
I did not date at all. Your father is the only person I dated. I went to the prom, but it was just a photo op, you know. And when I was away from home, I was so focused on education that I didn't date. You know, I would meet the guys after class at the canteen. That's what we call it. And but I never literally went out on a date. But I met your dad when one of my classmates said to my roommate and I have two guys that would like to meet you all. And so we said, okay. And so my friend, my other classmate, set up a blind date for me and my roommate. Well, my roommate had a father that would show up at any time to take her home. She never knew when her father was going to come and say, you're going home for the weekend. So the weekend that we had the blind date, her father showed up and she had to go home. And the blind date that my friend had her set up for, they called him to work. So it was left me and your father. Mm-hmm. And so she says, well, your father was ready for the date because he was ready to meet the young woman. Well, she didn't have a choice. She had to set me up with him. And he had told her, I don't want to meet any girls from Memphis because the girls from Memphis are way out of my league. So he definitely did not want to meet me. And my roommate was from the little small country town of Charlotte, Tennessee. So that's who he wanted to meet. He wanted to meet the country girl, not the city girl. Well, she had to go home, so he was stuck with me, you know. And so when I see him, I'm like, okay. He is very dark with a yellow shirt on. Doesn't he know he's not supposed to wear yellow? And of course, here I am. It's in the 70s, and afros was out. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I had a lot of hair, and I had this big afro, and I had the round glasses, you know. And that was the time they had the maxis and the minis, so you could go either way with the mini or with the maxi. Mm. And of course, I got the maxi on because it was in style then. And so he sees me with the long coat on and the afro and the big glasses, and he's like, oh no, that's the city girl. I don't want the city girl. And I see him and I'm like, I do not want him. But one thing that I noticed was how polite he was. And so we just went out to eat, and he dropped me back off. And at school on that Monday, she says, oh, how did you like him? And I says, I don't like him. My mom said books and boys don't mix, so I'm just going to stick with my books. But then her sister, who had graduated from TSU and got her first apartment, set up a party. And so she says, Connie, I want you to go to the party with me. And I said, well, Elaine, if Paul is going to be there, I don't want to be there. But when I told her, no, I don't like him because he got a gap in his teeth and he had a yellow shirt. I'm telling her everything I don't like. And she said, well, he's crazy about you. He really likes you. And I'm thinking, oh no. And so
my daddy.
And so when she says, come and go to this party, I says, well, as long as Paul's not going to be there, I go. She said, oh, no, he's not going to be there. I walk through the door, and he's the first one I see that's smiling at me because she's gone back and told him, she's crazy about you. She really likes you. So he's there to see me again because he thinks I like him. Because she's told him just the opposite. And so he's there and he's talking, but he says one thing that captures my attention. He says, "Do you mind if I pick you up after class?" Well, at the time, I stayed in a boarding house. Mm-hmm. I stayed in a boarding house with me and my roommate. And so I caught the bus to go back and forth every day. Well, I was only on a small amount of income. So the first thing I thought about, if he picks me up from school, that's an extra ride I got on my bus card because I had a 30-day bus card. And so I told him yes. So he would proceed to pick me up after class. Always polite. Always polite. And then he finally asked me out on a date. And because he was so polite and so nice, he was just the opposite. Even though I didn't date, I always heard from the other girls on how guys were. And so I said, well, yes, I'll go out on a date. And so when he showed up at the boarding house, he gets out of the car, he comes up, and he rings the doorbell. Well, the lady that ran the boarding house said no one, all of the girls she kept, no one ever came to the door and came in and introduced themselves. So he was the only one, and every time he came for a date, he always came to the door. He always held the door for me to get in and out the car. So because he was so polite and because he was never pushy, and he never was demanding, that's how we started dating. And the more he picked me up from school, the more I could use that bus card, and the more money it saved me. Cause, like I say, I was on a very, very tight budget that sometimes I couldn't even afford to eat. So I was glad that he would take me out on Friday nights so I could eat.
You got to tell him about crystals. Crystals. But
because my husband was from the country, it's a lot of things he didn't know about the city. Because his family, his father had died, his sister had moved his mom to Nashville from the little small town of Cedar Hill. And so he didn't know a lot of places. So when he would ask me where I would want to eat, I remember telling him, well, I would like to go to Crystal's. It was new to Nashville at the time. We're talking the 70s. So it was new to Nashville. So we pull up at Crystal, and they had the little thing outside where you could order outside, kind of like Sonic. That's how Crystals were then. It was not an inside restaurant. And so he pulls up, and he orders 1 hamburger, 1 fry, and 1 Coke. And I'm like, God, I'm really hungry. And he's only ordered 1 Crystal. So I didn't say anything. And so they brings it out, and he go, what is this? Why is this hamburger so small? And back at that time, they were like 10 cents. And I said, well, they're very small, so you have to get more than 1. He says, no, I'm just not going to eat here anymore. Where do you want to go? And I'm like, I want to go to Burger King because I knew I could get a Whopper.
Well, so you know what? I'm glad these stories because I wanted people to know who you are. Now you and Dad are married. You have 4 kids, 3 boys, 1 girl. I want to talk a little bit about parenting. Why was it so important for you? We knew why Dad worked it, but why was it important for you to raise us up in church? Why was that important to you?
It was important to me because that was the norm. You know, when you have a mother that brings you up in church, you think that's what automatically you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if you brought children up in church, they would now know the spiritual side. I knew children had to have the spiritual side and the natural side. Outside of church, they was going to get the natural side. So they had to have the spiritual side. And because I was raised up in church and because I got saved at a young age, I didn't want to deal with the world. I only wanted the church. And before I had children, that's the only place I went was to work and to church. Work and the church, occasional shopping. That was just my life. And because that was my life, that was only natural for me to always bring my children up in church.
Well, I remember going up in church. I remember Dad would work us on Saturdays, and he would tell you, if you ain't dressed right, you got to stay home and work. And so we would be, I remember growing up in our house, we had the one bathroom, and we would be fussing, trying to hurry up and get dressed because we didn't want to get left with Daddy, because Daddy be in the garage shining them lawnmower blades. I was like, I'm not getting left with Dad. I wasn't doing that. And so that helped us stay in church. And to this day, we're still in church now. And it's even an honor because what you did for me in 2003, I tell people the story all the time. When you put that book in my hand, you told me to teach Sunday school. And I'm like, Mom, I don't teach Sunday school. And you were like, just do it for Mama. And that taught me to kind of where I'm at today in my life. So I really appreciate that. One story I want to get to is a lot of people ask me all the time, it's some more thing I want to ask you, what started my journey to mentoring? A lot of people ask me that, and I tell them that in 2003, you asked me to be Dominique's big brother. And to this day, I always say, why didn't you ask Brian? Why you didn't ask Junior to be his big brother? Why did you ask Mark? Do you have any, this is something I always wondered. Why did you ask me?
The reason I asked you, Marcus, is because as a child, you were the one who was extroverted. As a child, you would always help other children.
I didn't know that.
When you all were younger and I had you at St. Vincent, your dad and I had to put you all in a private school because our jobs required us to be at work. His at 7, mine at 8. And at the time, when you all started to school, Paul Jr., you, and Brian would have been at 3 different schools. And you had to, they would not allow you to be at school early. Mm-hmm. So we had to put you in a school that had a before and after program. Mm-hmm. Before school and after school program. And so when we put you in St. Vincent, you were in the 2nd grade.
I remember that.
You were in the 2nd grade. And some reason or the other, because St. Vincent was a Catholic school and y'all got Christian teaching, you gravitated toward helping.
Okay.
You would give your lunch money to a program that they had. You would go hungry, and you would give your lunch money, and you would put it in some type of offering that they had there to help needy kids. Mm-hmm. And then in the neighborhood, you would always, any type of kid that was an underdog, you would try to help that kid. You could not stand to see kids who were poor. Even though we didn't have a lot, you always wanted to help. So that was like your nature. Paul Jr. and Brian were introverts. They did not deal with anyone. You were the only one that was the extroverted that would go the extra mile to help any kid. You would try to be friends with anybody. And so when your daddy put up a goal in the yard to play basketball, you were the one that had all the boys coming. Everybody was there for Mark. No one was there for Paul Jr. or Brian. Mm-hmm. Everybody was there for Marcus. And you really got in trouble because you got in trouble because it was 2 kids in the neighborhood that had a single mother, and they didn't hardly have food to eat. You would bring those kids in the house to feed them.
We didn't know it.
They were latchkey kids. They were not supposed to allow anybody in the house. Marcus would bring kids there to feed them.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I can't even remember doing any of that.
You would bring them in the house to feed them, and you got in trouble because one of the boys went into Marsha's room and stole her piggy bank that she had.
Oh, wow.
You was friends with his little brother, But the little brother had an older brother who was a teenager who would dominate you all. And he would follow the little boy that was your age into the house.
Okay.
And you felt sorry for this little boy because he didn't have decent shoes. So you took your brother's shoes.
Wow, I'm getting in trouble. I don't remember
was
none
too
of
big
this.
for your brother and gave it to this little boy who did not have shoes. So as a mother, you look at all of your children's, you look at their attributes. I knew you was one that could reach out and liked it to help. So when Dominique's mother died, and she was a single mother, and he had to go and stay with his grandmother, it was only natural for me to ask you to help, as opposed to Paul Jr. and Brian, because they were introverts. They didn't deal with people. You was the people person. You was the one that could relate. You was the one that was the helper. They were not helpers. And as a mother, it was only natural for me to come to you to help as opposed to them.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that. Some of that story I don't even remember. Wow, you still remember that?
Yes, yes.
Because I don't remember that. I remember the whoopings, but hey, it's just natural. But I did not know that was going to start me on this journey. You know, from what you asking me that in 2003, now it's 2022. And from mentoring, helping young men who don't have fathers was my passion. I just, you know, sometimes people ask me that question all the time. It's like, why do you do this? Why do you help people? And I tell people, I don't know. I just said, my mom asked me to do something in 03, and I just said, yeah, I'll do it. And then Dominique came like a son to me because me and Toy didn't have children at the time. And I see now, you know, I always said that God just put that on my mom. It was just things I used to think as a, you know, as an adult, that God put that on my mom's heart to pick me because this is what he designed for me to do. I didn't know that. And that's something that still, you know, rattles my mind to this day.
I think God, in his infinite wisdom, knew as a child you had a compassionate side. You had a compassionate side that your brothers did not have. Not that they won't help somebody that need help, but you go out of your way. You went out of your way. Even as a child, you would go out of your way to help somebody. And when you have that compassionate side, then of course that's what God wants to use, because that's how he wants to reach people. People that need help, he needs somebody. He needs helpers. You was always a helper. Paul Jr. and Brian were like, well, if they ask me, I'll help them. You didn't wait for that. If you saw a need and you felt like I can help that need, you reached out to them. They didn't have to reach out to you.
Well, I mean,
that was the difference.
Well, I didn't know that. This is actually therapy for me because I didn't even know that. People ask me this question. I'm telling you, Mom, all the time. And I always say, I don't know.
As a child, that's the way you were.
I did not know.
You always help people.
Now, that's new to me because I didn't know I was like that as a child.
No, that's
I did, and I didn't know you saw that in me. And I still will. I know we don't have a lot of time on this podcast. Why even ask me to read a book for Sunday school? That to this day, I still don't know why you asked me to do that. And because that was just never something I thought I'd be doing.
Well, the bottom line is a class was offered on teaching techniques. And I remember saying to you, Marcus, I think that this will be a nice class for you to take. So you took that class along with several others dealing with teaching techniques. Well, because I was the instructor with that class, I reached out to all of the students who were in class to say, you think that you would like to teach? Would you like to teach? Well, I reached out to you and said, Marcus, I think that you would be a good teacher. Why don't you try it? And you did.
Well, that actually opened my eyes to go back to college because I knew it took me a long time. And I used to see Brian and Marsha be successful, and I always wanted that. And I'm thankful I was never jealous of them. I was thankful I was never jealous of their success, and that God blessed me to do some of the same things they did and to what I'm doing now, which I never thought in my wildest mind I would be doing what I'm doing now. I wanted the corporate career. I wanted to look like Brian and Steve and others. But, you know, you always say God always have a plan for your life. And so it's been an honor to be teaching beside you for Sunday school for all these years. That makes me grow and grow hungrier to be, I want to be like my mom. And I know I can never teach like you, and but I always wanted to be like you. So as we begin to wrap this up, I wanted to really ask you questions on why it's important to have that relationship with your son. You have 3 boys, and I understand the daughter's different, but you had a great relationship with all of us, and we all love you. Why was that important to you? And how did you do that with us, building that relationship with 3 boys?
Well, number one, as a mother, and you love all of your children, first of all, you watch their habits. I would watch you all, even when you were out in the basketball court playing basketball and you thought I was in there cooking. I was at the window watching. I paid attention to your schoolwork that came home. I talked with your teachers. I wanted to be sure that I was doing everything as a mother that I could do to keep you all on the straight and the narrow. I knew that kids could easily go astray. So I watched the friends you dealt with. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure that you weren't around anyone who could pull you. You, unlike your brothers, was a follower. Mm-hmm. I noticed that early on. And I thought, I've got to watch Marcus a little bit closer because Paul Jr. and Brian didn't deal with people. But Marcus would follow anybody. And so I had to watch who you were around. So when the boys came to play basketball in the yard, I made sure I talked to them and I told them, no foul language, no fighting. And I wanted to make sure that you and your brothers knew whatever you don't see in our house, don't bring it in our house. Mm-hmm. You don't hear foul language in our house. Me and your daddy did not argue. We did not talk bad. We didn't talk about each other. So we wanted to make sure that you all were stable. Mm-hmm. Because my mom taught me early, it's what your children see in the home that's going to have the biggest impact on them. And so therefore, I had to watch you all closer because if your father, most of the time he worked at night. Mm-hmm. So I had to watch you all because I had to go back and tell him things I saw I didn't like. Mm-hmm. So there were things I felt like he could deal with better. Mm-hmm. So it was my job to make sure that when you all left my house at 18, you all definitely knew right from wrong.
Well, you taught us a lot. The work that I do, and when I see some of these moms who, treat their kids bad or do the mentoring you seen I've done, kids I've met, I'm truly thankful to have a solid mom like you in my life to help me. I know I wasn't the best kid.
You was just a child. That's all right. You were a child. You were the one that kept me on my knees Mom. The most.
Don't tell. I knew that was gonna come out.
Marcus was the one that I got the calls from the teacher. I didn't get the calls about Paul Jr. and Brian. It was Marcus. Even when Marcus was in the 6th grade,
Mom,
school was out. School was out.
I know you're going to tell this story.
And I got a call from his principal. And I says to him, Mr. Ward, he can't be in trouble. School is out. And he laughed at me and he said, yeah, some of his papers are still here. I need for you to pick them up and take them to his other school. Because Marcus was the one that always got in trouble. He always got in trouble.
I didn't know you were going to tell that story, Mom. I be getting it. But you know what? I thank God for the discipline that I received. And I thank God for the encouragement and the talking that you've done. you and Dad are the solidest parents in my life. And I think now when I look at you, how you've helped so many women, you go into the mission, you still volunteer with Costco, and I'd be like, Mom, slow down. But you have a heart to volunteer and help people, and I feel like I'm a pattern of that. And
you got the same heart.
Thank you.
Out of 4 children, he's the only one with that heart.
And thank you. And I was wondering, is that, part of me think that's going to be MJ, because MJ loves to help people, and Jordan's kind of like, I'm going to do my own thing. So it's kind of like, I'm wondering, is that like a link going all the way down? But I want you to talk to any moms that may be single, that's maybe going through of raising their kids. Can you give them some motherly advice on how they can continue to steadfast when they're trying to raise a child without their father in the home?
I would offer the advice to watch your child. If you see that your child is going through something, sit down and have an honest conversation, and always be open that your child can always come to you. I always told you all, you can tell me anything, just be respectful about it. But you can talk to me about anything. Your children or your child should always feel like I can always go to mama, and that mama is going to tell me the truth. Mama is not going to judge me, but mama is going to tell me the truth. So always have a relationship that your child is not ashamed to come to you, good or bad. And that's one thing you did. You would even tell her bad. I would tell you all, you're not going to always get a whipping, but always be honest with me so I can help you. And so you would tell me the good and the bad. Paul Jr. and Brian wouldn't.
Now, I didn't know that.
But you would tell me the good or the bad.
I appreciate that.
And so therefore, that's the relationship that you want to have with your child. But you'll never have that relationship if you're so busy that you can't pay your child attention. You can't pick up on the fact that something happened in school. You can't pick up on the fact that certain things they're doing at home, they should not be doing this. You got to pay your children attention. You got to take out time to realize something is not just right. And it takes a lot of prayer. Mothers who don't pray, the devil will have your children. So I have to say that. Mothers who do not pray, the devil will take control. Pray. God gives you so much in prayer about your children that you wouldn't even notice. And that's what he did with me. He gives me, even now, in prayer, he gives me certain things about all 4 that I have to go to them with. Because when your child gets 18, I took the role of an advisor. When your child gets 18, you should have instilled in them everything that they need to know to make it. And now you should become an advisor, not one who gonna always step in and help them. No, let them fall on their face, and then you tell them why they fell on their face. Certainly, if you want to help them get up, but don't always be there to do everything for a child that's 18 years old, or they never will make it on their own.
Well, I wanted to give my audience your strong motherhood advice, things that you've taught me. I'm still listening to you. I enjoy picking up the phone and calling. We talking about all kinds of stuff. And it's just great to have a mom that has so much wisdom and knowledge, because you've seen the bad growing up without the father piece, but you had a strong mother, my grandmother, who I love to death, who I miss so much, even though she used to grab my wrist and say, boy, you putting on weight. I miss that. And I miss Grandma, and I know she's rested in heaven. And Mom, you've been the best mom that I ever had. You've been stern, but you've been fair. You pushed me when I need to be pushed, and even though I thought maybe you didn't care, I knew you did. But I thank you so much, and I honor you for this Mother's Day, and I thank you so much for taking time from your Saturday to join me on my podcast, because this means the world to Mark. This means the world to your son, and it's just so enjoyable to have a mom who I can be close to. It helped me be more of a man and a father a husband. It helps me in all those areas. So thank you so much. And any final advice or word you want to give to our moms that maybe listen to this podcast as we end it?
Before I give advice to moms, I want to say I thank you. I thank you for being that extroverted child, because even now, you're out of 4 children, you're the one that calls and checks on us. We live out in a rural area. If something were to happen to us, you would be the one that would know it, because if you call and you don't get either one of us, you're going to take some action. Brian, I may hear from Brian once a month. Brian may call me once every 2 or 3 months. Marcia may call once every 2 or 3 weeks. But I'm going to hear from you, if not every day, every other day. So I thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Because if something happened, I know that Marcus is going to be the one. If something happened to us, he calls to check on us after a storm. He want to make sure we okay. And he's the only one that does that. So I thank God for you. I thank God for you. And it's an honor, actually, for me to be here on this podcast. And the advice that I would like to give to all mothers is to never give up on your child, to always pray for your child, always be there for your child, not so much to help them out of trouble, but to help them understand right from wrong. Don't cover up their sin, expose it, and let them understand that I'm not here to support what you did, but I'm here to show you love and kindness. But whatever you've done, you got to own up to it. So don't always protect that child when that child is doing wrong. Be the mother to stand up and tell that child, that's wrong. That's wrong. I'm not going to condone that. But at the same time, show your child love and kindness, but never condone their sin, so that they can understand right from wrong. As long as mother is hiding and protecting them, they will continue to do wrong.
Well, you heard it best. You heard the best example from my mom. You see why I get a lot of who Marcus is from my mom. So, Mom, I really thank you so much for joining this podcast. Happy Mother's Day early, and you're the best. So thank you, audience, for listening in for another episode of Stronger My Father podcast. I ask you to continue to support us through our website. If you're interested in being a sponsor for one of Stronger My Father podcast, please reach out to us at stronginmyfather.org. Please follow us on the social media sites. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon. Please support us. Please continue to help this program and this podcast continue to reach people and help change their lives. God bless you. I'm your host, Marcus Meneese. Until next time, God bless you.